This week's Break Time with interview is with the wonderful Simon Hepburn, Director of Marketing Advice for Schools. Simon, thank you, and thank you for joining us, and welcome to our interview series. Great to have you here.
Cool, thank you. It's lovely to always talk to people about schools and marketing.
So I see a lot of your work on social media and a lot of your articles posted, Simon, and I know that you do lots of work around marketing consultancy, training, content creation. Before we begin, can you tell us a little bit about marketing advice for schools and your role there?
Sure. I mean, I set it up because I was into sort of marketing at the time. I was a teacher, and I sort of worked with a lot of school marketers. And I just, it was quite a lonely profession. I know it's a bad thing to say, but you're often by yourself in a school. Maybe one or two people, and it's across all the different sectors. So independent schools obviously traditionally have had lots of people working in marketing, but more and more multi-academy trusts now in the state sector have marketing functions, and so do big schools. And there are organizations that bring schools together, like AMCIS, who are brilliant, but actually bringing individuals together, there wasn't so much that. And again, some people said they were interested in getting into the area, into the sector, and didn't really know where to start. So we put a lot of what I do is around networking and newsletter and writing, and we have lots of events that we used to have face to face, and now we have online recently. Just really to bring people together to talk about the issues, and obviously surveys is a key part of that. Around that, I still teach 2 days a week, which keeps you grounded a little bit. But I also do some training for various people, school business leaders, AMCIS, been contributing to some of their programs, and individual training more and more online. And I have a small number of schools that I work with one-to-one, and it's really nice to get out and spend time with them, and just sort of try and help them.
Wonderful. So you've mentioned there your annual survey, and that was actually one of the first ways that I came across your work, Simon, was looking at the trends that you'd found in the last 12 months in and around school marketing. What trends did you notice in the last 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, we've been running the survey since 2015 with various ways, but last year was obviously really interesting. I mean, and difficult and so on with COVID. But I think the big thing really was that marketing and communication in schools came of age, really. The challenges that schools were facing, and all sorts of schools. It wasn't just about recruitment; it was about telling parents they couldn't come into school, to getting children engaged in remote learning, working with communities to supply computers and things like that. And all sorts of schools got involved in that, and they had to change. You had to change. Schools had to reinvent themselves, and so things like the use of video sort of shot up. That people started creating YouTube channels, going Facebook Live, all sorts of things that people have talked about for ages, but now had to use, and they see the value of it. Even things like parents' evenings, making them virtual. What you guys do, putting the admissions thing. People, you had to have virtual open days. You had to have people coming in and seeing, what the school was like from outside. How do you do that when you can't have people coming in? And so, it was a big step change, and I think lots of schools have sort of realised that. And in many ways, they the big thing I would say to them is look at what you've done that was different, and see what worked, and keep going. Don't throw everything out. There's some fantastic work that people have done, but I think it's something that people are going to find difficult because it's not urgent. It's important, but it's not urgent. If we with that.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting when a solution comes into play because it's necessary. We have to be virtual, we have to be digital, but then actually it has some unexpected benefits. Lots of schools say to us that by making their communications and their events virtual or digitized, they've been able to have a bigger reach, for example, with their online events. So it's something they want to keep, even though they can welcome people again face to face.
And it fits the various trends. I mean, so many independent schools are seeing applicants from Hong Kong at the minute, with the people for the UK from Hong Kong. People are beginning to move back around the world as well. And the idea that you can you can get a really good idea what the school is like without having to visit it, really, really helps. And I know all sorts of schools that have had those inquiries from overseas. And at the same time, there will be people who want to go in and do the face-to-face thing. And again, that's probably the marketing challenge, that you're busy anyway, and suddenly you've now got to do the online stuff and you've got to do the offline stuff as well. And part of that is saying to schools, see the value that this is bringing, because you are bringing in lots of people, but also see how much you can reuse content. I'm a big fan of that. If you're gonna have a talk, head teacher's gonna give a talk in an open day, record it. Don't waste that. Record it and put it out on social media, on your website. Spend a bit more time maybe preparing it so it's really high quality. But video is much easier to use than it has been. And the other trend that I'm seeing, which is really, really good, is schools empowering their students to do it as well. Get them, I was at the school last week, which setting up a school media crew, which was just really exciting. Some really engaged students who are going to go around the school and actually tell the story themselves. And that sort of thing is going to be a way of doing that, I think.
Absolutely. And I think it's really nice to get the students' perspective on what the school is like and what the community is like as well. It can be a real selling point, can't it?
It can be, and it's also really eye-opening, because again, talking to these students last week, it's really interesting how much they know of what's happening. So we're talking about planning the content for the school, and they said, everyone needs to know about the new reporting, how we're going to change reports in the school. And one of the teachers was like, oh, how do you know about that? Because they know about what's going on.
They always know.
They always know what's going on, and it's a case of saying that's actually really important to them and their parents, and it's a little thing, but it's about getting something out there that will help the parents understand the changes that are happening. And at the same time, they were passionate about the ethos of the school and the way that it brought people together. And it's a really, really interesting discussion about how do you show that a school cares, in video, and then some great ideas about how to interview people and do that. It's a different level. It's a different level from we've got an open day, come and see us, which is what happened in the past.
Yeah, definitely. So I think then that the rise of video was probably something that wasn't so surprising for schools. They didn't have any other choice but to go down that route. Is there anything that came out of your survey that did surprise you about schools and their choice of marketing?
I think probably there's some little changes which are around what they're targeting and what they're doing, and I think getting recruiting students is still number one. But I think the one thing that struck this year was about recruiting teachers. That a lot of schools are saying, "Oh, hang on, we're getting involved for the first time in." It was about 13. It's only 13%, but it was much more than we had before. Getting involved in teacher recruitment, and again, we've had this in international schools where people haven't been able to move. There's a shortage of teachers in some areas and some subjects and some parts of countries, and actually turning that into a marketing sort of operation rather than an HR operation where you're sort of happy. That's something that we're going to have a look at over time and see if that goes up. And the other one was about the new challenges for multi-academy trusts, which and again, this is interesting. I didn't see it in the private sector, but again, private schools are coming together as well. You've got bigger organisations now. How do you create a brand and a communication across that when you're dealing with 10, 20, 30 schools? And I think that's going to lead to a whole new type of person who works in school marketing. Again, because the skills are very different than working for one school and doing everything for one school. So
Absolutely. And that might be one of the differences between the independent sector and the state sector. And I know that you did survey both. Are there any comparisons, any differences between the two?
Yeah, generally, I have to say the independent sector, is the leader in this. They tend to spend more money. The fundamental they have bigger marketing budgets, they have bigger marketing teams, and what we've seen over time is that they tend to do things first. So, for example, when Instagram came up, it was independent schools that started looking at Instagram and using it particularly for initially sixth form recruitment, but also now for talking to parents of different ages, and so on. State schools tended to follow with that. I think where we've seen state schools do different things, because they've got less money, they have to be more innovative. And so one of the speakers at our last event was James Tucker, who works at a school in Doncaster. He's done an amazing amount of work with Facebook Live, more than I've seen private schools do, because he's got a small community. He needed to get some serious messages across, obviously, in the last year about COVID and about why they were doing things. And so he would jump on Facebook Live, to explain at a very short notice what was going to happen the next day, and why, for example, they hadn't closed at particular points where other schools had closed. And it's fascinating talking, and listening to people like that, who are in touch with their communities. So that's what I would say, is learning that way. And certainly the other thing independent schools, should be thinking of is that they are coming together. There are more and more mergers. I mean, I've seen that. We're seeing that all the time. International groups coming together, prep schools merging with secondary schools and becoming, all through schools, and so on. And again, when that's happening, making sure that you keep the best bits of the individual schools. And that's a debate that I think multi-academy trusts are having now. Initially, it was a sort of all big one size fits all. Let's just go in and paint everything grey, or paint everything whatever a colour is, and so on. And now there's much more thought about how do we keep the different bits, working with their communities while getting the benefits of the whole thing together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that example of using Facebook Live. What is your opinion on the future of social media marketing in schools?
I think it's a really interesting stage we've got to, because I think people have, in a way, I'd almost say we're past the peak of it, and that may be sort of something that's controversial. But in the last year, for example, the survey showed that independent schools are using Twitter less, and I thought that was quite interesting. That Twitter is quite good at shouting out there, and with Donald Trump and people like that, get the message out there through Twitter. But actually, not a lot of people use it. And so it's useful as a sort of feed into your website and things. But actually, when you do surveys, it's not used that much, and so people are moving away from it. Facebook, I think, is brilliant. Facebook, it was the sort of, it was the complete thing. I love Facebook events, for example. So you can run an event for a school, and you can see who's going, and you can bring your friends. You can say, oh, my friend's going. I'll go along and I'll see her. And it's got lots of things like that. But younger people are moving away from that, and Instagram doesn't have those features. It doesn't have the community feel of it. So I think people are moving back to, it's almost apparent people sort of moving back to websites and to personal messaging. WhatsApp is the key thing, Facebook, and that's much more difficult for for schools to sort of influence. So that again takes me back, I suppose, to the core thing really, which is in a school it's all about storytelling, and if you get the right story and let your community know about it, they will share it out there, and they will share it out there by whatever means. But it's actually a bit more difficult than it was, than a few years ago, where everybody was on Facebook, and that was the key thing that you needed to use.
Absolutely.
But it'd be interesting.
Absolutely. And you've talked about bringing students into that as well. And social media is, well, there's so many different social media platforms, and students will use some more than others. How do you think that schools can bring their students on board with what they're putting out on social media?
I think it's again by engaging them. There's been lots of talk in the last few weeks about TikTok and how it's been used badly by students to produce offensive video. And part of me saying, well, just a bit like you have hackers, and you employ the hackers for to work in companies to protect their own internet. These are people who have got skills, they've got ability to get out there and share messages, and they're using it for the wrong purpose. So are there children in your school who are really fascinated by this, by streaming, by gaming, all these sort of things that you can actually bring in and say to them, look, can you make a TikTok? What would a TikTok look like that was selling the school? And you can work with them, and you can obviously absolutely make sure that it's checked and so on before you send it out. You're not going to give them the account and go with it. But I think that sort of idea, and that's helping the students develop the digital skills which they will need anyway. The fact we're doing a video chat, that wouldn't have happened 2 or 3 years ago. And yet when they graduate, when they start working, they're going to be expected to make short videos. They're going to be expected to edit things really quickly and put it out. We're not going to have to wait 6 months for something. So I think giving them those skills and looking at that, it's a really exciting exciting area, and I know a number of schools that are doing some really good work in that area. And also it's sort of something that the schools have lost a bit. I mean, when I was at school, I was involved in school magazines and school newspapers, and it got me really, and it was really exciting. And you don't see as many now. Schools still have them, but they're not as big. They're not as often. They don't do the big magazines. And those were skills that sent children on to jobs in journalism, and so on. And we want sort of, I'd love to see people, leave school and be able to be to be broadcast journalists and things like
Absolutely.
that.
Absolutely. It would mean coming onto a video like this would be less nerve-wracking. I still get a little anxious every time we do one of these interviews, Simon. I don't know about you. So absolutely. And I love this side. Sorry.
No, I'm saying you get more used to it, but you're absolutely right. I mean, it's like doing webinars and things where you're sitting there and you have no idea whether anyone's actually listening to you.
Yeah, it's a real skill. Yeah. It's a real skill. And I also love this idea of the shared ownership and of the content that's produced. The students feel like they own it, the school marketing team own it as well, and they've collaborated. So absolutely love that idea. One of the things that I'd love to talk about, because it was a real surprise for me that it was even mentioned in your survey, is the idea of website accessibility. Now, I'd heard a lot of talk around this in higher ed, but I'd never come across it in schools.
Yeah.
Why is that so important, Simon?
Well, one of the things we sort of one of the partners we had this time with the survey was Concept 4, who do web design, and it's something that they've sort of been noticing as well. And working internationally, again, I think is where it comes up, because in America they have quite strict laws about this, and Americans with Disability Act, I think it's called, and a lot of for example, if you put video on a public website, it has to have subtitles for people who can't hear, and again, that's sort of been a little bit missed out because a lot of schools, are sort of rushing around trying to set up websites, trying to set up communication. And you sort of forget sometimes that that people who you're trying to talk to might have difficulty in understanding in all sorts of ways, and it's not just being able to hear or see. Sometimes the quality, the fonts, the font needs to be accessible. All sorts of things need to happen. And again, a bit with a marketing hat on, the key thing with marketing is always not to lose any particular group. You don't want to lose a segment of your audience. And you don't want to lose a segment because they can't access online, just in the same way that you don't want to lose a segment because they can't come and visit because of COVID. So we did that. We asked that question, and as you said, the numbers were really quite serious, and particularly people not even knowing what the issues were. So people didn't really know what the grades were of accessibility. And actually, when people were being honest, I think 18 got the figures here. 18% said they didn't consider their website to be accessible. So they straight up went hands up. We haven't even thought of that. So that's a lot of people out there to say, well, actually, maybe you just need to go and do that. A lot of people left it to their web designers and said, well, they must have done this. Again, it's is that important? And as you said, 44% weren't sure. So again, it's something like that, and people didn't check very often. So I think it's an easy thing to do, to go out there and as I said, look at the different levels. There's AAA and AAA, Web Accessibility Guidelines, and it's the WCAG. Guidelines. So WCAG level A, level AA, and level AAA, and you can look them up, or I can send you a link to them afterwards, and just check what level you think you are at, what level you need to be at for your particular audience. Have a think about it. And again, like anything with marketing, it does fall into research as well. So next time you're doing a survey of users or parents, ask them, do you find the website easy to use with changes to it?
Absolutely. Do you think that's something that will be changing in the near future for schools?
I think the problem, and this comes back to something that comes through the whole point, which is schools. School marketing is just such a busy place. I think if you're working a large organization and you have a team, you have a web team of 3 or 4 people, it's something that will be on their agenda all the time. It's difficult, to do these things when you're in a school and you are being pulled around all the time, and you've got an event and you've got someone visiting, and you're trying to set up, a social media, and you're trying to do lots of things. So it should be.
Brilliant. Okay. So are there any other things then, Simon, that you think will evolve in 2022 and beyond, and that school marketers should be more aware of?
I think these things are changing. I mean, I think the challenges that are facing school marketers are very, very different. And I think one of the things that's so important is to research, and is to look at the environment. It's not it's nowhere near as easy as it was a few years ago. I'm talking, I work with a few schools in the southeast of London, and the impact of Brexit is still working through in many ways. And people who thought, oh, our school is full, it's fine, these things will change, and it could be positive, could be negative. I don't want to get into politics of it, but communities are moving, things are changing, the Hong Kong community moving in. There's a whole need for much more research and monitoring of what's actually happening around you. Things are much more uncertain. And for state schools as well. I mean, you talk to business managers and they sort of say, oh yes, there's a new school opening next door to free schools, academy change. Those sort of things are happening all the time, and that affects independent schools as well, because people are moving between them. In the next few years, the number of the birth rate in the UK has dropped quite significantly. So again, you have primary schools saying, we don't understand why there's few people applying. It's nothing to do with what you've done. It's entirely to do with the fact there are fewer children around. And so things like that, even if you are
I'm so sorry.
It's one of those. Even if you're full and doing a really good job at the minute, you might not be in a few years' time. You might need to think about, strategically changing. Are you going to be merging or coming together with other schools? Should you be looking for that sort of idea? There's interesting stats about the number of children that are that have gone into home education. It's gone up. 30-40%, wasn't it, that people are reporting? Where have they come from? They've left schools of various sorts. And again, will that stay? Will we get a big homeschooling movement? So I think market research is something that schools need to try and spend more time on. And you could do that relatively easy now, using some of the techniques that have come through COVID, like doing surveys, online surveys, focus groups by Zoom and things like that. Just finding out what's happening in the community. That's certainly what I'm being asked to do more and more of, and it's quite interesting sort of task.
It is really interesting. One of the things that you and I have talked about, Simon, that I think is really, really interesting and important is that I've been really struck by the different types of guests that have come on to the show, and of those working in schools, it's been really interesting for me to find out more about the backgrounds that they came from, what their careers have been like. And I've noticed that almost all of the school marketers that have come on and talked to us have come from completely different environments. They might have done marketing in a publishing background, from a financial background, hospitality. And there's so much good talent within school marketing. Do you think that we should be doing more as an industry to keep the talent in the education sector?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I started in the oil industry many years ago before I became a chemistry teacher. But I think this is the bit where getting together and forming these larger organizations, or trying to partner together, is going to help, because so much. I mean, I there's a few people who I've seen over the last few years who are fantastic people who came into the marketing sector, came into school marketing sector, and didn't last very long. And now you sort of follow, you catch up with them, and they're back in industry or back in an agency. And part of that problem is that you are this jack of all trades. You have to do everything. And I think schools, first of all, the fundamental is that you need to recognize the value of marketing. And one of the things I start all the time with is a slide showing, the actual value of just getting 2 or 3 new people into your school. If you're not full, that's an awful lot of money. If you think they're going to stay for 7 years, and you're talking, in an independent school, hundreds of thousands of pounds. So investing that in somebody to do that properly, or a team to do that properly, to me is a bit of a no-brainer. and again, even if you are full to the level that you think you're full, how can you expand? Sixth forms don't really have a limit in most schools. You can take on an extra 10 students without breaking the system. So unless you are one of the bigger schools, one of the most successful schools, you've got that opportunity to invest in them. And ironically, of course, the ones that are big and full do have big marketing teams and do actually keep people. I mean, that's the thing. So making that brave decision to invest in it, then training people, and I think the role of a school marketing director has to be as a coordinator, as a strategic person, rather than trying to think of them trying to run around and do lots of little things. So they can outsource things like digital marketing, they can outsource event management, and the job becomes to coordinate and run those, rather than having to do everything themselves. At which point people, get a bit frustrated. Sometimes they feel they're not moving on, and then they get the chance to take that experience and move to a larger organization. And I think also, this is where the roles of people like Amkis and come in to say, we want, they did a good job in terms of they've got new sort of higher level qualifications, and people are taking those. So absolutely, people should be using those networks and moving through. It is a great job in many ways. It's a lot easier to find all the great stories is if you're working in the oil industry, where there's
it's definitely a really nice sector to be in. I find. On that note, do you think that marketing in a school is any different to marketing any other business, say?
Yeah, I think it's just the key thing is the stories, and you can find them. So I remember taking someone into school a couple of weeks ago, and suddenly we're walking around, and suddenly a load of year sevens run out with spears and shields and so on, and they're off to reenact the Battle of Hastings in the playground. That sort of thing, immediately that's exciting, that's different, that's something that you can use and you can tell. If you're working on a factory floor, you don't get those sort of things. You're having to work really, really hard to generate the stories. In fact, at schools, one of the challenges is actually cutting things down. And one of the things I do a lot with schools is to say, let's focus on the key messages. So, let's have a calendar of events coming up and a calendar of what you're doing that minimizes, the fact that you have to, have a 50-page newsletter every week and so on. But that's the thing, you can find this stuff really easily, and then it's about packaging it and sending it out. And also you have the other thing is you have the community, so you have really good relationship with parents, in most cases, and you can talk to them, you can give them stuff that they will pass on. So this sort of, the people talk about word of mouth, but actually it's about giving people things that they will then talk about to their friends and their families and so on. So it's really easy to make a big difference. That's the other thing I think about school marketing. You can come in and you can make a big difference to a school in a short period of time. So it's really exciting. But as I said, the schools are that wrong size organization. They're not tiny, one-man bands where you expect to work in that sort of environment, but they're not huge where you get lots of development. It's the problem of being a sort of medium-sized organization, really.
Yeah, definitely. I think this idea of storytelling and having, an abundance of really interesting, really unique stories to tell is a really nice note to wrap up on, Simon. If anybody listening to this wants to know a little bit more about marketing advice for schools and your surveys and other bits of work that you do, how can they contact you?
It was very, very Ron Seal, the branding. So marketingadviceforschools.com is the site. My email address is simon@marketingadviceforschools.com. But actually, if you want to look at the survey's got its own website, which is, hang on, it's got disappeared off my screen. Let me just type it again.
That's okay.
There's Education Survey 2021.co.uk. So you can download the whole survey there, and you can actually see the event that we launched it at, and hear from the likes of James Tucker and some other people as well at that. So Survey 2021.
Perfect. We'll link to that in the newsletter part that goes alongside this interview, Simon. It's been really, really insightful talking with you today. I really appreciate it, and I know that everybody listening will as well. So just a massive thank you for coming on and being a brilliant guest.
No problem. Thank you very much for talking. It's great. Thanks, Sophie.
Thanks so much, Simon. We'll talk soon.
Okay, bye, Sophie.